Welcome to Deep Dive into Knowledge.
Welcome to Deep Dive into Knowledge. I invite you to join me in a quiet observation. A simple thought experiment that begins with something, entirely familiar. Imagine for a moment that you are walking through the countryside at dusk. It is a landscape you know well, perhaps a place you've walked 100 times before. You can feel the uneven, sort of yielding ground beneath your boots. You can smell the damp earth, the decay of fallen leaves, the heavy scent of agricultural soil just preparing for the night. You hear the wind moving through the trees, creating a chaotic, gentle rustle. There is a profound comfort in the wild, unpredictable asymmetry of the natural world. A forest grows where the seeds randomly fall, dictated by the chaotic scatter of the wind and, the indiscriminate foraging of birds. A river carves its path according to the path of least resistance, meandering through the landscape in an entirely unstructured manner. The roots of ancient oaks gnarl and twist over each other in a desperate, slow-motion battle for resources. The natural world, for all its immense, terrifying power, is fundamentally irregular. It does not naturally draw straight lines. It does not calculate perfect right angles or, plot precise mathematical equations into the dirt. We trust this irregularity. We rely upon it deeply to define the boundaries of what is natural and what is artificial. But imagine waking up the following morning, walking out into that very same predictable rural landscape, and finding that a profound disruption has occurred. Overnight, without a single sound echoing across the valley, without a single footprint left in the soft mud, a massive, impossibly precise geometric pattern has been carved into a field of standing crops. It is not a clumsy shape. It is a masterpiece of complex mathematics, vast and perfect, spanning hundreds of meters across the landscape. You stand at the edge of this quiet field looking at an architectural manifestation that simply should not be there. There is no trace of human machinery. There are no broken stalks snapping under the weight of heavy boots. There is no trampled, muddy earth. There is just a sudden, silent, breathtaking order imposed upon the wild. This is the paradox we are giving our quiet, undivided attention to today. When we encounter something highly orderly, mathematically flawless, and undeniably intelligent in a place where only wild, chaotic nature should reign, our first instinct is often to look away. Our modern impulse is to dismiss it as a trick, an elaborate prank, or to force it into a comfortable, cynical category so we do not have to grapple with the implications. But today, we are not going to look away. We are going to explore the phenomenon of vast geometric shapes appearing in landscapes. Today, our mission is to synthesize decades of biological field research, historical accounts, and measurable electromagnetic data to understand the exact mechanisms behind these anomalies. We are not approaching this as a sensational mystery, but as a tangible physical reality that interacts directly with the Earth, leaving marks that demand rigorous contemplation. It suggests that these ordinary fields, these quiet rural landscapes we take for granted, might be hiding a much deeper, older pattern that we are only just beginning to notice. So I must pose the foundational question to begin our exploration. Is this purely a modern phenomenon born of the digital age, a side effect of our modern obsession with viral imagery? Or how deep into the physical historical record does this exact geometric manifestation reach?
Well, the assumption that this is merely a modern sort of new age puzzle is actually the first illusion we have to dismantle.
Right. We tend to think it started with the internet, or at least the news cycles of the 1980s.
Exactly, yes. But if we look deeply into the historical record, long before the capability of aerial photography or mass media, we find a remarkably consistent trail of documentation.
How far back are we talking, realistically?
Well, one of the most fascinating pieces of evidence is a woodcut pamphlet from 1678. It is commonly referred to as the Mowing Devil of Hertfordshire.
Oh, I think I'm familiar with the image, the woodcut with the demon in the field.
That is the one, yes. The pamphlet describes a farmer who awoke to find his field of oats laid down with such mathematical precision that, to quote the text, no mortal man was able to do the like.
That is quite specific phrasing for the 17th century.
It is. The illustration shows a demonic figure holding a scythe, carving a perfect circle into the crop. The villagers of the 17th century obviously lacked the scientific vocabulary to describe a geometric anomaly, so they attributed it to the supernatural.
Well, let me challenge you on that 1678 woodcut, though. Skeptics frequently point out that 17th century pamphlets were largely allegorical, right? Designed to teach moral lessons rather than record objective agricultural data.
Yes, that is a very common argument.
A farmer refuses to pay a mower, so the devil mows his field. How do we know this isn't just a convenient folktale that modern observers have retroactively applied to a recent phenomenon?
That is a fair critique of folklore, certainly. But the 1678 woodcut does not exist in isolation. As we move closer to the modern era, the documentation shifts from theological to strictly scientific.
Okay, what sort of scientific documentation?
Consider a letter published in the journal Nature in January 1880. It was written by the scientist John Rand Capron.
1880, so well before any modern hoaxing trends.
Precisely. He was observing a field in Surrey following a storm and discovered several perfect circles of flattened wheat. Capron approached it not as a mystical event, but as a physicist.
Right, looking for a mechanical explanation.
Yes, he noted the exact geometry, standing stalks perfectly intertwined with the flattened ones, and he theorized it was caused by some form of localized cyclonic action.
So he blamed the weather.
He did. Though he could not explain the sharp, mathematically perfect edges of the circles with a mere wind theory. But his observation was entirely empirical.
I see. So the physical presence of these circles is undeniable throughout history.
Indeed. Furthermore, we must radically expand our understanding of the Candace itself. These precise geometric formations have been documented in sand across the Middle East.
In sand?
Yes. And they have been discovered etched perfectly into thick ice in regions like Scandinavia and Lake Baikal, and they have appeared in pristine, untouched snow.
Wow. Ice and snow. I suppose that drastically alters the mechanical requirements of the phenomena.
It changes everything, yes.
Because if a perfect circle appears in a frozen river, you cannot exactly blame a couple of locals with wooden boards. The thermodynamics required to spin a perfect disk of ice, sometimes hundreds of feet across, without fracturing the surrounding ice sheet or leaving structural damage, well, it is staggering.
It is physically impossible for a person to do covertly. We are looking at a phenomenon that is manifested in more than 40 countries, with over 5,000 distinct, mathematically intricate patterns formally recorded.
Over 5,000. That really frames it as a global, persistent environmental reality. But I want us to move past the superficial debate over hoaxes.
Quite right.
We aren't here to debate whether someone can crush wheat with a PVC pipe. You and I already know the physical differences. What I want to examine is the microscopic evidence.
The biology.
Exactly. When we look at a genuine anomaly versus a human-made hoax, what exactly is happening at the cellular level of the plant?
The cellular distinction is where the entire phenomenon separates itself from human mimicry. When a human attempts to flatten a crop, even carefully with a smooth pipe, the result is biological trauma.
The plants are just broken.
Yes, the stalks are crushed. The internal vascular structure of the plant, the xylem and phloem, is ruptured, and the plant essentially begins to die from the trauma.
Right, because it has been violently stamped on.
Exactly. But in a genuine formation, the mechanism of flattening is entirely different, and it centers on the nodes of the plant stalk. Scientifically, these are known as the pulvini.
Pulvini. And what exactly is their function?
They act like the joints of the plant. Researchers, particularly biophysicists who have taken hundreds of samples from inside and outside these circles, have discovered that the pulvini of the affected plants are significantly elongated.
Elongated, not broken.
Not broken at all. They are stretched and bent, often at perfect 90-degree angles, without snapping.
That sounds physically impossible without some kind of heat.
You have hit the nail on the head. The leading hypothesis, supported by the cellular data, is rapid, highly localized microwave heating.
Hold on, microwave heating.
Yes. The moisture contained inside the pulvinus is subjected to an intense, instantaneous burst of heat.
Oh, I see. So it boils the water inside the joint.
Exactly. This moisture rapidly turns to steam, expanding the cellular tissue from the inside out. This expansion makes the node incredibly pliable for a fraction of a second, allowing the plant to be laid down horizontally.
That is absolutely fascinating.
And we know this because, under a microscope, we frequently find microscopic expulsion cavities, literal blowholes in the plant nodes, where the superheated steam violently escaped.
Wait, I want to make sure the mechanics of that are entirely clear. You are saying that an intense, localized burst of electromagnetic radiation, essentially microwave energy, is boiling the water inside the plant's joint, making the living tissue as soft as warm glass, bending it to a precise angle, and then letting it cool and harden in that new position.
Precisely the mechanism.
And all while leaving the plant completely alive and continuing to grow.
Yes, the plant continues to ripen and grow horizontally. A human with a physical object simply cannot replicate a biological microwave expansion.
No, of course not. You cannot stomp a biological node into expanding with steam.
Exactly. And the thermal anomaly does not stop at the plants. When researchers analyze the soil inside a genuine formation, they find measurable changes that corroborate this intense, brief heat.
Changes in the soil chemistry.
Specifically, they find a significant increase in the presence of meteoric dust, microscopic spherical iron particles.
Iron dust from the atmosphere.
Yes. These iron particles are always present in our atmosphere, constantly falling to Earth. But inside the circles, these particles are often found melted and fused together into clusters.
Melted together? That would require an immense amount of heat.
It requires a massive, instantaneous thermal event to flash melt iron dust in the atmosphere just before it settles on the soil.
That brings a completely different framework to the mind. If we are dealing with a phenomenon that utilizes rapid microwave radiation and flash melting thermal bursts, the analogy of a chaotic wind or a physical human force completely fails.
It falls apart entirely.
Let me offer a different analogy then. Instead of thinking of this as a heavy hand pressing down on a rug, what if we look at the science of cymatics?
Cymatics. Yes, that is a very relevant concept.
For anyone unfamiliar, cymatics is essentially the study of visible sound. If you take a metal plate, cover it in a thin layer of sand, and run a cello bow along the edge of the plate, the acoustic vibration causes the sand to spontaneously arrange itself
into incredibly complex, mathematically perfect geometric mandalas.
Right, because the sand is moving away from the violent vibrations and settling into the quiet nodes of the sound wave. If we apply that to the fields, could we be looking at a massive, localized frequency, perhaps an acoustic or electromagnetic wave, where the crops are simply acting like the sand on the plate?
Revealing the geometry of an invisible vibration.
Yes, exactly that.
The cymatics model is arguably the most accurate physical analog we currently possess for this phenomenon. It explains the lack of physical trauma.
Because the plants are not being pushed by a physical object.
Precisely. They're being reorganized by a frequency. In a cymatic pattern on a metal plate, the complexity of the geometry increases as the frequency of the vibration increases.
So low pitch makes a simple shape.
Yes, a low frequency creates a simple circle or a cross. A highly elevated frequency creates breathtaking fractals and multi-layered geometries.
Which perfectly maps onto the history of these formations, doesn't it?
It mirrors the historical progression perfectly. In the 1970s and 80s, the patterns were primarily simple circles or quintuplets. But as the decades progressed, the geometry evolved into staggeringly complex fractals.
And we really must emphasize that complexity because we are not just talking about circles anymore. We are talking about designs that incorporate advanced Euclidean geometry and known mathematical constants.
Very advanced mathematics, yes.
But skeptics often argue that nature is inherently fractal. You know, a snowflake is a fractal, a fern leaf is a fractal. Therefore, they argue, a highly chaotic weather system could theoretically produce a fractal pattern in a field. How does the geometry in these fields differ from the natural crystalline fractals we see in weather phenomena?
Well, the difference lies in the medium and the intent. A snowflake forms a fractal because the molecular structure of water dictates a hexagonal crystalline growth when it freezes.
It is just physics doing what physics does.
Exactly. It is a passive structural inevitability. The crops in a field, however, do not possess a geometric imperative to lie down in the chase of the Julia set.
The Julia set.
You mentioned fractals, and the Julia set is a perfect example. In July 1996, near Stonehenge, a massive formation appeared depicting a flawless Julia set fractal.
I remember seeing aerial photos of that one. It was massive.
It consisted of 151 individual circles, spiraling out over 900 feet in length. The mathematics required to plot a Julia set on a flat plane are incredibly complex.
Let alone plotting it in a field of living wheat.
Quite. But what completely dismantles the weather theory and the human hoax theory, frankly, is the time frame.
How fast did it appear?
That specific 1996 formation appeared in broad daylight within a 45-minute window.
Wait, 45 minutes?
Yes. A pilot flew over the field at 5:30 in the afternoon and reported undisturbed crops. He flew back over the exact same field 45 minutes later, and the 900-foot, 151-circle fractal was entirely complete.
That is just. It is hard to even process. A random whirlwind does not possess the calculating intelligence to execute a 900-foot mathematical theorem in under an hour.
It simply does not.
So how does an organizing principle, whatever it may be, manipulate a living medium across 900 feet in 45 minutes? This demands we look at the phenomena that frequently accompany these manifestations.
The visual anomalies.
Right. If this is a localized plasma or a cymatic effect, there must be a visible energy transfer. We often hear reports of localized light anomalies, small spheres of glowing light, seen moving over the fields the night before, or the very moment a pattern is formed.
Yes, those reports are very common.
If we apply our cymatics theory, are these lights the physical manifestation of the frequency?
That is the leading scientific interpretation of those lights. They are frequently described by eyewitnesses, and often captured on video, as small, luminescent spheres.
Moving intelligently.
Often moving with distinct purpose and fluid intelligence, yes. In physics, these would be described as plasma vortices, highly concentrated, localized pockets of ionized gas.
So a plasma vortex acts as the delivery system.
Exactly. If a plasma vortex is the delivery system for the microwave radiation we discussed earlier, it perfectly explains the rapid, silent manifestation.
Because it just sweeps across the field.
Yes. A plasma vortex, spinning at high velocity and emitting a specific electromagnetic frequency, could sweep over a field, flash heat the moisture in the plant nodes via microwaves, and organize the stalks into a cymatic pattern almost instantaneously.
But if there is an organizing intelligence acting as a lens, focusing this plasma into a complex geometric pattern, that energy has to be drawn from somewhere.
It does. It requires a massive power source.
A plasma vortex does not just spontaneously generate out of nothing in a quiet rural landscape. This naturally leads us to question the geography. If we step back from the individual plants and look at the macro environment, is the Earth itself acting as the power source for these frequencies?
That is exactly where the geographical data points us. When we map the global occurrences, they are not evenly distributed.
They cluster in specific areas, don't they?
They do. They cluster in very specific regions, and the most prominent cluster in the world is the region of Wiltshire in the United Kingdom.
Wiltshire, which is famous for its ancient history.
It is. But Wiltshire is not just visually picturesque or historically significant. Its underlying geological architecture is highly unique. The region sits upon a massive, porous chalk aquifer.
An aquifer, so an underground river system.
Essentially, a giant subterranean sponge holding vast amounts of water, layered with clay. In geological terms, moving water through a porous substrate like chalk generates a subtle electrical charge.
Just from the friction of the water?
Yes. This creates what are known as telluric currents. Natural, low-frequency electrical currents moving through the Earth's crust.
Wait, so you're suggesting that the geological makeup of the Earth beneath the field is essentially functioning as a massive natural battery?
Exactly that. A subterranean aquifer system acts as an enormous electrical conductor. Now, consider the ancient human element of Wiltshire that you mentioned.
The monuments.
Yes. This exact same landscape is home to Stonehenge, Avebury, Silbury Hill, and numerous ancient burial mounds.
That cannot be a coincidence.
We must ask ourselves, did ancient humans drag megalithic stones for hundreds of miles to build Stonehenge on a random patch of grass? Or did they build their monuments there because they, possessing a sensitivity to the natural world we have long since lost, could feel the immense telluric currents converging at that specific geological node?
That raises a fascinating problem of cause and effect. It completely reorients our perspective. We tend to think of these crop patterns as a message being broadcast down onto the Earth from the sky.
A very modern assumption.
But if the chalk aquifers are generating the current, the Earth itself is the broadcaster.
Precisely.
The ancient standing stones and the modern geometric crop patterns are simply two different expressions of the exact same geographical energy node. The ancient builders used heavy stones to mark the energy. The modern phenomenon uses the crops as an oscilloscope to make the energy's frequency visible.
And the oscilloscope is a brilliant way to phrase it.
It implies that the landscape is actively communicative and has been for millennia.
It implies a deeply interactive environment. If the Earth is generating the telluric current, and an atmospheric plasma vortex interacts with that current, the resulting electromagnetic friction could easily manifest as these localized microwave bursts and cymatic patterns.
The friction creates the art.
Indeed. And the reality of this intense localized energy field is not just a theory. We can measure it by observing what happens when our modern technology and our own biology cross the threshold from the normal, undisturbed field into the geometric pattern.
This is where the friction between our known reality and this anomaly becomes deeply tangible. Let's start with the technology. What exactly happens when we walk into one of these localized magnetic fields with our machines?
It is quite dramatic, actually.
We hear stories of cameras failing and tape recorders warping, but what is the actual mechanism causing the failure?
The technological failures are a direct confirmation of a residual electromagnetic field. Let us take the classic example of an analog magnetic tape recorder, which researchers frequently use in the 1980s and 90s.
Right, before digital recorders.
Yes. Magnetic tape records audio by aligning microscopic magnetic domains on a strip of plastic. When a researcher walks into a genuine newly formed circle, the tape recorder frequently speeds up, wildly altering the pitch or completely erases.
Just from crossing the boundary into the circle.
Yes. The mechanism here is ambient magnetic interference. The localized electromagnetic field remaining inside the geometry is dense enough to penetrate the casing of the recorder and forcibly realign the magnetic domains on the tape.
It just overrides the mechanics of the machine.
Completely overrides it. Yeah. Similarly, modern digital cameras and heavy agricultural machinery, like combine harvesters, rely on electronic control units and batteries.
Oh, the harvesters. I have heard the farmers get quite frustrated.
Very much so. A sudden, massive shift in the localized atmospheric charge, a remnant of the plasma vortex, can instantly drain a lithium-ion battery or scramble a microprocessor. Harvesters will inexplicably stall at the exact boundary of a formation.
They just die.
They refuse to cross the threshold because their electronic fuel injection systems are being overwhelmed by the ambient field.
The boundary itself acts like an invisible wall to our electronics. But our machines are relatively simple compared to human biology.
That is where it gets truly profound.
How does that dense ambient field affect the human physiology when an individual steps across that same boundary? We are fundamentally bioelectrical organisms ourselves. Our nervous systems run on minute electrical impulses.
And that is precisely why the human reaction is so extreme and so polarized. When an individual steps into a strong, low-frequency electromagnetic field, it interacts directly with their central nervous system.
What does that feel like?
For some individuals, this ambient frequency interacts with their temporal lobes or their inner ear, causing immediate and severe vertigo.
Motion sickness, basically.
Intense nausea, crushing headaches, and a profound sense of exhaustion. Their bioelectrical system is essentially experiencing interference, much like static on a radio.
But you said the reactions are polarized.
They are. Conversely, other individuals step into the exact same geometry and report the absolute opposite. They experience a massive surge of cellular energy, a feeling of deep euphoria, and in well-documented cases, the spontaneous alleviation of chronic pain or illness.
Spontaneous healing, just from standing in the field.
Yes. In medical science, we already use targeted pulsed electromagnetic field therapy to stimulate cellular repair and bone healing.
Oh, of course. PEMF therapy.
Exactly. It is entirely plausible that the frequency resonating inside the crop formation is inadvertently acting as a massive, uncalibrated electromagnetic therapy session, deeply affecting the bioelectrical pathways of the human body.
That is an astonishing thought. That an intelligence or a natural process is leaving behind an energetic footprint so powerful it can physically alter the firing of our neurons.
It is a profound interaction with our environment.
But while humans can intellectualize these symptoms or perhaps be influenced by the psychological expectation of being inside a mystery, animals cannot.
No, animals are purely reactionary.
The animal reactions strip away all human bias. I am particularly fascinated by the behavior of dogs. What is it about the specific geometry that causes a dog to walk to the dead center of the pattern and simply anchor itself to the ground? What are they sensing that we cannot?
To understand the canine reaction, we have to look at biological magnetoreception.
Magnetoreception, meaning they can feel magnetic fields.
Yes. Animals, including dogs, possess microscopic deposits of magnetite, a highly magnetic mineral, in their retinas and their ethmoid bones, which are located in the nasal cavity.
So they have literal compasses in their heads.
Exactly. This gives them the ability to physically sense the Earth's magnetic fields, an ability they use for navigation and spatial orientation. When a dog enters a genuine formation, it is not seeing the flattened wheat. It is sensing the intense, organized magnetic field.
So they feel the shape.
Yes. If the formation was created by a spinning plasma vortex or a cymatic frequency, the exact mathematical center of the geometry would logically be the nodal point, the eye of the storm, so to speak, the concentrated center of the magnetic anomaly.
And the dog is drawn to it.
The dog, overwhelmed by this dense magnetic pillar, navigates straight to the source and lies down, effectively pinned by a sensory input that humans are entirely blind to.
It is a humbling image. A dog anchored to an invisible pillar of magnetism, while we stand around holding dead cameras, utterly oblivious to the architecture of the environment we are standing in. It highlights how tragically limited our five senses truly are.
We miss so much of the physical reality around us.
We rely entirely on our technology to validate our reality, and here is an environment that aggressively dismantles our tools, leaving us with nothing but the physical imprint on the chalky earth and the undeniable reactions of our own nervous systems.
The physical imprint is the ultimate enduring truth of this phenomenon. It is deeply unfortunate that human mimicry has provided a convenient off-ramp for mainstream scientific inquiry. But when we strip away the hoaxes, when we look at the boiled pulvini, the flash-melted meteoric dust, the complex fractal mathematics executed in minutes, and the undeniable electromagnetic residue, we are left with a profound physical record. These manifestations serve as a quiet, tactile reminder that our understanding of the natural world is not nearly as complete as we comfort ourselves into believing. There are still massive invisible forces, deep telluric currents, and perhaps profound intelligences interacting with the biological canvas of our planet. We simply lack the necessary instruments to measure them entirely, and we often lack the humility to admit that we are standing inside a mechanism we do not fully comprehend.
Humility is exactly what is required when confronted with such deliberate, mathematically flawless beauty. As we reflect on our journey today, we have traversed far beyond the superficial distractions. We have traced the historical continuity from 17th century woodcuts to 19th century scientific journals. We have bypassed the physical trauma of human hoaxes to examine the microscopic evidence of superheated plant nodes and flash-melted iron dust. We have replaced the cliché of chaotic weather with the elegant, precise mechanics of cymatics and plasma vortices. We have seen how the deep geological architecture of ancient aquifers acts as a battery, drawing a line between ancient megaliths and modern geometry. And finally, we have observed the profound friction that occurs when our bioelectrical systems and our technology cross the threshold of these invisible, resonant environments. We may not have a definitive name for the author of these patterns. We do not know for certain if it is an undiscovered law of physics, the deep energetic resonance of the earth itself, or an intelligence speaking through the medium of agriculture. But we have established that it is a rigorous physical reality. As we close our time together, I want to leave you with one final unresolved thought to ponder as you look out at the seemingly ordinary natural world around you. If these massive patterns are indeed the Earth interacting with an unseen energy, what does it mean that over the decades, the mathematics have evolved from simple circles into staggeringly complex, multi-layered fractals? Consider the possibility that the Earth beneath your feet is not merely a passive sphere of rock and water upon which we happen to live. Consider that it might be a deeply responsive, biologically and electromagnetically active entity engaged in a very slow, very quiet, ongoing dialogue. And it is using Euclidean geometry and cymatic resonance as a universal language. Perhaps the real mystery we're facing isn't discovering exactly who or what is transmitting the frequency. Perhaps the true challenge is whether humanity will ever evolve our perception enough to learn how to read it. Another thoughtful topic will be explored in our next episode. I invite you to continue to reflect on the world around you, to question the ordinary, and to notice the quiet mysteries that remain. Take care.